"You're being selfish, Tessa. She deserves this more than you," my mom yelled, her voice echoing through the wedding venue's marble hallway. I stood there, stunned, my face burning with embarrassment. It was supposed to be Mariah's special day at the elegant Tampa Bay hotel, but here we were, having another family crisis. The scent of gardenias and champagne filled the air, yet all I could feel was the weight of their judgment crushing me. My name is Tessa Whitlow. I'm 26 years old, and I've spent my entire life being the afterthought in my own family. My sister Mariah, the golden child, could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Meanwhile, I couldn't even breathe without them finding something to criticize. But this time, it wasn't just about forgotten birthday parties or hand-me-down clothes. It was about Grandma Helen's inheritance, and my mother's belief that I didn't deserve what had been left to me. For 3 months now, since Grandma Helen passed away, I had been quietly managing the antique shop she left me, along with her house in Sarasota and a surprising portfolio of real estate investments. My parents had made it clear they thought the inheritance should have gone to Mariah instead. When I finally tried to explain that this was Grandma's decision, not mine, my mom shut me down like I was some ungrateful child looking for attention. The wedding reception was in full swing just beyond these doors. Mariah looked radiant in her ivory silk gown, surrounded by 200 guests who hung on her every word. I had tried to blend into the background, nursing a glass of sparkling cider and watching my sister dance with her new husband, Trevor. For a moment, I had allowed myself to feel happy for her. She truly did look beautiful, and Trevor seemed to adore her. But that peace didn't last long. My mother had cornered me near the restroom, her face flushed with anger and champagne. Behind her, I could see my father, Gary, standing with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He rarely spoke during these confrontations, but his silence always felt like agreement with whatever my mother was saying. "This is ridiculous," my mother continued, her voice dripping with frustration. "Helen must have been confused when she wrote that will. There's no way she meant for you to inherit everything while Mariah gets nothing." I felt my heart sink as I realized this wasn't going to be a quiet conversation. Other guests were starting to notice the commotion, their heads turning toward us with curious expressions. The last thing I wanted was to cause a scene at Mariah's wedding, but it seemed like that choice was being taken away from me. Growing up in the Whitlow household meant learning early that love came with conditions. My mother, Doreen, had been a beauty pageant winner in her youth, crowned Miss Citrus County in 1985. The faded photographs of her in sparkly gowns and rhinestone tiaras still decorated our family room mantel, constant reminders of her glory days. She had spent the past 24 years trying to relive that success through Mariah, who inherited her striking features and natural charisma. I, on the other hand, had inherited my father's quiet demeanor and unremarkable appearance. While Mariah received dance lessons, modeling classes, and designer clothes, I was told to focus on practical skills, like cooking and cleaning. When Mariah wanted to quit her part-time job at 16 because it interfered with her social life, my parents supported her decision. When I asked for help with college tuition, they suggested I take out loans and build character through hard work. The only person who ever made me feel valued was Grandma Helen. Every weekend from the time I was 12, I would take the bus to her antique shop in Sarasota. She taught me how to identify genuine Victorian jewelry, how to restore damaged furniture, and how to spot valuable pieces that others might overlook. Those Saturday afternoons in her cluttered shop, surrounded by forgotten treasures and old books, were the happiest moments of my childhood. "You have a good eye, Tessa," she used to say, watching me carefully examine a porcelain figurine or an old painting. "You see the value in things that others dismiss. That's a rare gift." My parents barely tolerated these visits. My mother often complained that spending time with dusty old junk wasn't helping me develop any real-world skills. She never understood that Grandma Helen was teaching me about history, art, and business. When I graduated high school and announced my intention to study art history and business administration, my mother rolled her eyes and muttered something about, Useless degrees. Mariah, meanwhile, was busy winning local beauty contests and dating the quarterback of her college football team. She had a natural ability to command attention wherever she went, and my parents basked in the reflected glory of her success. They attended every pageant, every social event, every moment that showcased their beautiful daughter. During my college years, I continued working at Grandma Helen's shop, learning the ins and outs of running a small business. I discovered she owned not just the shop, but several rental properties throughout Sarasota that provided steady income. She had been quietly building wealth for decades, all while living modestly in her small house behind the shop. When Grandma Helen was diagnosed with cancer last year, I spent every free moment caring for her. My parents visited occasionally, but they always seemed uncomfortable around illness and medical equipment. Mariah came by twice, both times bringing flowers and staying for less than an hour. In her final weeks, Grandma Helen held my hand and told me she was proud of the woman I had become. "You're the only one who really understood what this place meant to me," she whispered. "I know you'll take care of it." 3 months ago, when the lawyer read Grandma Helen's will, the silence in his office was deafening. I sat between my parents, my hands folded in my lap, as he announced that Helen Whitlow had left her entire estate to her granddaughter Tessa, the antique shop, the house, the rental properties, and a stock portfolio worth more than anyone had realized. My mother's face went through several color changes, from pale white to bright red. "There must be some mistake," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Helen always said the family business should stay in the family." "It is staying in the family, Mrs. Whitlow," the lawyer replied gently. "Tessa is family." "But Mariah is the older daughter's child," my father spoke up for the first time. "Shouldn't inheritance follow traditional lines?" The lawyer shook his head. Mrs. Helen Whitlow was very specific about her wishes. She left detailed instructions about why she chose Tessa as her heir. "Would you like me to read them?" I watched my mother's jaw clench. "That won't be necessary." The ride home was silent, but I could feel the tension radiating from the front seat. When we pulled into our driveway, my mother finally exploded. "I can't believe she would do this to us," she said, whirling around to face me. "After everything we've done for that woman, all the visits and family dinners, and she leaves everything to you? You barely even talk to her." "I spent every weekend with her for 14 years, I said quietly. "I helped run her shop. I took care of her when she was sick." "Oh, please," my mother cut me off. "You sat around looking at old junk. Mariah was busy building a real life, a real future. She's getting married in 3 months, Tessa. Do you know how expensive weddings are?" That's when I realized this wasn't really about honoring Grandma Helen's memory or understanding her choices. This was about money, and about my mother's belief that Mariah deserved everything good that came into our family's orbit. Over the following weeks, the pressure intensified. My mother would call me daily with new arguments about why I should do the right thing and share the inheritance with Mariah. She pointed out that Mariah was starting a new life and needed financial security, while I was still single and could make my own way with my college degree. My father, true to form, said little but nodded along with whatever my mother suggested. When I tried to explain that Grandma Helen had specifically chosen me for reasons that went beyond money, he would change the subject or find an excuse to leave the room. The breaking point came 2 weeks before Mariah's wedding. I received a formal letter from a lawyer my parents had hired, questioning the validity of Grandma Helen's will and suggesting she might not have been mentally competent when she signed it. The letter made my stomach turn. They were actually trying to legally challenge my grandmother's final wishes. That night, I made a phone call that would change everything. The morning of Mariah's wedding, I tried one last time to have a reasonable conversation with my mother. I found her in the hotel's bridal suite, fussing over Mariah's veil, while a team of makeup artists and stylists worked their magic. The room smelled like expensive perfume and hairspray, and everywhere I looked, there were flowers, champagne bottles, and gift boxes. Mom, can we talk privately for a minute? I asked, standing awkwardly in the doorway. Doreen barely glanced up from adjusting Mariah's train. We're a little busy right now, Tessa. Can't this wait until after the ceremony? It's about Grandma Helen's estate, I said, causing both my mother and sister to look up sharply. Mariah, who had been admiring herself in the mirror, turned to face me. Tessa, you're not seriously going to bring this up today, are you? It's my wedding day. I know, and I'm sorry, but I received the letter from your lawyer, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I can't believe you're actually trying to contest Grandma's will. My mother's expression hardened. We're protecting this family's interests. Helen wasn't thinking clearly in her final months. Everyone knows that grief and medication can affect judgment. She was completely lucid when she made that will, I replied. I was there. I saw her meet with the lawyer multiple times to make sure everything was exactly as she wanted it. You manipulated a dying old woman, my mother snapped, finally abandoning her pretense of civility. You spent all that time at her shop, filling her head with ideas about how much you cared, when really you were just positioning yourself to inherit everything. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. That's not true, and you know it. I loved Grandma Helen. I spent time with her because she was my grandmother, not because I wanted her money. Mariah stood up, still in her elaborate dress. Look, Tessa, I don't want to fight about this, but Mom has a point. You did spend a lot more time with Grandma than the rest of us. Maybe she felt obligated to leave you everything because of that. Or maybe she left it to me because I was the only one who actually cared about her and her legacy. I shot back, my patience finally wearing thin. Her legacy? My mother laughed bitterly. It's an old junk shop, Tessa. It's not some grand family tradition. Helen should have sold that place years ago and put the money toward something useful, like Mariah's education or her wedding. I felt something shift inside me at those words. The dismissive way she talked about Grandma Helen's life's work, the assumption that everything should ultimately benefit Mariah, the complete disregard for what our grandmother had actually wanted, it all crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. You know what? I said, my voice surprisingly calm. You're right about one thing. Grandma Helen did make her choice based on who she thought would best honor her legacy, and she chose me. That's exactly what I'm talking about, my mother said, her voice rising. You think you're so special, so deserving, but look at your sister. Look at what she's accomplished. She's beautiful, she's successful, she's getting married to a wonderful man. She has a future. What do you have? A dusty shop and a bunch of old furniture. The makeup artist and stylist had stopped working and were pretending not to listen to our argument. I could see them exchanging uncomfortable glances in the mirror's reflection. I have something you'll never understand, I said quietly. I have Grandma Helen's trust and respect. I have her legacy. And I have the legal right to do whatever I want with what she left me. My mother's face flushed an angry red. We'll see about that. The lawyer thinks we have a strong case. Then I guess we'll see each other in court, I replied, and walked out of the bridal suite. As I made my way back to my hotel room, I realized that the conversation had actually been a relief. The pretense was finally over. We were no longer pretending to be a happy family working through a difficult situation. The battle lines were drawn. The wedding ceremony itself was beautiful, I had to admit. The Tampa Bay Hotel's grand ballroom was decorated with thousands of white roses and twinkling lights. Mariah looked stunning as she walked down the aisle, her smile radiant as she approached Trevor at the altar. For a moment, I allowed myself to forget about our earlier confrontation and simply be happy for my sister. I sat in the third row, wearing a navy blue dress I had bought specifically for the occasion. My parents were in the front row, of course, beaming with pride as they watched their golden child exchange vows. When the minister pronounced Mariah and Trevor husband and wife, the room erupted in applause and tears of joy. During the cocktail hour, I mingled politely with relatives and family friends, most of whom had known me since childhood. Several people asked about Grandma Helen's antique shop, and I was surprised to discover how many of them had fond memories of visiting her store over the years. "Your grandmother was such a sweet woman," said Aunt Patricia, my father's sister. "I bought my dining room set from her shop 20 years ago. It's still the most beautiful furniture I own." "She had such an eye for quality," added Uncle Robert. "I remember her telling me stories about the history of different pieces. She could trace the provenance of a chair back 3 generations. These conversations reminded me why I felt so protective of Grandma Helen's legacy. She hadn't just been running a business. She had been preserving history and helping people find beauty in their homes. As the evening progressed, I noticed my mother watching me from across the room. Every time I laughed or engaged in conversation with other guests, her expression grew more pinched. I realized she was probably worried that I was telling people about our family dispute. The truth was, I hadn't mentioned the inheritance situation to anyone. This was Mariah's day, and despite everything that had happened between us, I wasn't going to ruin it for her. When dinner was served, I found myself seated at a table with several of Mariah's college friends. They were all polite and included me in their conversations about their careers and recent travels. For a brief moment, I felt like a normal person attending a normal family wedding. But that illusion was shattered when the speeches began. Trevor's best man gave a funny toast about their college adventures. Mariah's maid of honor talked about their friendship and how perfect Trevor was for her. Then my father stood up to give the father of the bride's speech. "Mariah has always been our little princess," he began, his voice warm with emotion. "From the time she was born, we knew she was destined for great things. She's beautiful, talented, and kind-hearted. She deserves every happiness life has to offer." He went on to talk about how proud he and my mother were of the woman Mariah had become, how excited they were to welcome Trevor to the family, and how they looked forward to spoiling their future grandchildren. What struck me wasn't what he said about Mariah. It was what he didn't say about me. In a 20-minute speech about family and love and pride, he never once mentioned his other daughter. I might as well have been invisible. As he concluded his toast and raised his champagne glass, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. I had spent 26 years hoping that someday my parents would see me, really see me, as someone worthy of their love and pride. But sitting there, listening to my father talk about family while completely ignoring my existence, I finally understood the truth. I would never be enough for them. No matter what I accomplished, no matter how successful I became, no matter how good a person I tried to be, I would always be the consolation prize daughter in their eyes. After the speeches ended and the dancing began, I stepped outside onto the hotel's terrace for some fresh air. The Tampa Bay glittered in the moonlight, and I could hear music and laughter drifting from the ballroom behind me. I was trying to process the emotions from my father's speech when I heard footsteps approaching. "There you are," my mother said, her voice sharp despite the celebratory atmosphere. "We need to finish our conversation from this morning." I turned to face her, noting that she had changed from her pale pink mother of the bride dress into a darker cocktail dress for the reception. Her makeup was still perfect, but her expression was harder than it had been during the ceremony. "I thought we had finished it," I replied calmly. "You made your position very clear." "No, Tessa. I made my opening statement. Now I'm making my final offer." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You transfer half of Helen's estate to Mariah, and we'll drop the legal challenge. Everyone walks away happy." "Half?" I almost laughed. "This morning you wanted me to give her everything. Now you're negotiating?" "I'm being reasonable," she said. "You keep the shop if it means so much to you, but the real estate and investments should go to Mariah. She's starting a new life. She needs financial security." "And what about what Grandma Helen wanted?" I asked. My mother's mask finally slipped completely. Helen was a selfish old woman who lived in the past. She spent her whole life hoarding junk and living like a pauper when she could have enjoyed her money. Is that really what you want to become? The cruelty in her voice took my breath away. This was how she really felt about the woman who had raised my father, who had been kind to all of us for decades. Grandma Helen was one of the most generous people I've ever known, I said quietly. She paid for Dad's education, helped you buy your first house, and never asked for anything in return except respect. And she couldn't even get that from her own family. Oh, please, my mother scoffed. She was manipulative and controlling. She knew exactly what she was doing when she left everything to you. She was trying to cause problems in this family. Or maybe she was trying to make sure her legacy went to someone who would actually appreciate it. That's when my mother's composure finally cracked entirely. You selfish little brat, she hissed. Do you have any idea how much we've spent on your sister's wedding? Do you know how much debt we're in because we wanted to give her the perfect day? The admission hung in the air between us. So that was what this was really about. They had overspent on Mariah's wedding and were hoping to recoup their losses from my inheritance. That was your choice, I said. Grandma Helen's estate has nothing to do with your financial decisions. Everything in this family affects this family, my mother shot back. You don't get to just take what you want and ignore everyone else's needs. I'm not taking anything, I replied, my voice growing stronger. I'm keeping what was freely given to me by someone who loved me. Love? My mother laughed bitterly. Helen didn't love anyone but herself. And apparently she passed that trait on to you. I felt the last thread of my patience snap. You know what, Mom? You're right. I am being selfish. I'm selfishly choosing to honor my grandmother's wishes instead of funding your mistakes. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. You're going to regret this, Tessa. Mark my words. I was heading back toward the ballroom when my mother caught my arm, her grip surprisingly strong for someone in her late 50s. The music was louder now, and I could see couples dancing through the tall windows, completely unaware of the drama unfolding on the terrace. We're not done talking, she said, her voice low and threatening. Yes, we are, I replied, trying to pull my arm free. I'm going back inside. You're not going anywhere until you agree to do the right thing, she insisted, tightening her grip. Do you see your sister in there? Do you see how happy she is? Are you really going to destroy that happiness because of your selfishness? I'm not destroying anything, I said, but my mother wasn't listening. You've always been jealous of Mariah, she continued, her voice rising despite our proximity to the ballroom doors. You've never been able to stand the fact that she's prettier, more successful, more loved than you'll ever be. The words hit their intended target, but instead of feeling hurt, I felt something else entirely. A kind of cold clarity that settled over me like armor. You're absolutely right, I said, my voice eerily calm. I'll never be as pretty as Mariah. I'll never win beauty contests or charm everyone I meet. But you know what I will be? I'll be the granddaughter who honored her grandmother's wishes. I'll be the person who built something meaningful with the gifts I was given. And I'll be free of this family's toxic expectations. My mother's eyes flashed with rage. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth, face reality, accept that you'll never love me the way you love her? You ungrateful. But before she could finish the sentence, her hand flew up and connected with my cheek in a sharp, stinging slap that echoed across the terrace. The silence that followed was deafening. Through the ballroom windows, I could see that several guests had noticed the commotion and were staring in our direction. My mother's face was flushed with anger and what might have been immediate regret, but it was too late to take back what she had done. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat of the handprint she had left there. Then I looked directly into her eyes and smiled. Thank you, I said quietly. Thank you for what? My mother asked, confusion replacing anger in her voice. For showing me exactly who you really are, I replied, my smile growing wider. For 26 years, I kept making excuses for you. I told myself that maybe you did love me, just differently. Maybe you showed favoritism because Mariah needed more attention. Maybe if I just tried harder, worked harder, achieved more, you'd finally see my worth. I took a step back, putting distance between us. But this, slapping me at my sister's wedding because I won't give you money that isn't yours, this finally gave me the clarity I needed. My mother's face had gone pale. Tessa, I didn't mean to. Yes, you did, I interrupted. You meant every word you said, and you meant that slap. And I'm grateful, because now I know exactly where I stand. I could see my father approaching through the ballroom doors, probably wondering what was taking so long. Behind him, Mariah was visible on the dance floor, spinning in Trevor's arms, completely oblivious to the scene unfolding outside. I want you to know something, I continued, my voice steady and clear. Grandma Helen didn't leave me her estate because she was confused or manipulated. She left it to me because she knew I was the only one who would truly appreciate what she had built. She knew I would honor her memory, not just cash out and buy designer handbags. My father reached us just as I was finishing. What's going on out here? He asked, looking between my mother's stricken face and my oddly serene expression. Mom was just giving me some final advice about family loyalty, I said, and I was thanking her for the education. I looked at both of my parents, memorizing their faces one last time. Enjoy the rest of the wedding. I hope it was worth everything you spent on it. Then I turned and walked away, leaving them standing on the terrace as I headed not back into the ballroom, but toward the hotel's main exit. Behind me, I could hear my mother calling my name, but I didn't look back. I had finally found the strength to walk away from people who would never value me, and it felt like the first breath of air after drowning. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a cafe in Edinburgh, Scotland, watching the morning mist roll over the ancient castle walls. The coffee was stronger than what I was used to back in Florida, and the air carried a crisp bite that made me pull my wool sweater tighter around my shoulders. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of legal meetings, financial arrangements, and long-distance phone calls. Before leaving Tampa, I had met with the estate attorney and a private wealth management firm that Grandma Helen had apparently been working with for years. It turned out that her modest lifestyle had hidden a much larger fortune than any of us had realized. The antique shop was now being managed by Eleanor Morrison, a former colleague of Grandma Helen's who understood both the business and the historical significance of the inventory. The rental properties were generating steady income through a professional management company. And the stock portfolio, well, that had grown substantially since Grandma Helen's passing. I pulled out my phone and reread the message I had received from my lawyer that morning. Certified letters delivered to all family members as requested. Your instructions have been carried out exactly as specified. Those letters contained a simple message. Any future contact attempts would be forwarded to my legal team. All inheritance claims had been permanently resolved in my favor, and I was pursuing a complete separation from the Whitlow family. I had also included a statement that any attempts to contest the estate further would result in a countersuit for harassment and emotional distress. My phone buzzed with another message, this one from Eleanor at the antique shop. 3 new acquisitions this week, including a beautiful Victorian jewelry collection. Your grandmother would be so proud of how we're expanding her vision. I smiled, thinking about how Grandma Helen had always talked about traveling to Scotland someday. She had been fascinated by Scottish history and had collected several pieces of Highland pottery over the years. Now I was here, living the adventure she had only dreamed of. The apartment I was renting overlooked the Royal Mile, and I had already enrolled in a graduate program at the University of Edinburgh to study art history and museum curation. For the first time in my life, I was making decisions based entirely on what I wanted, not what my family expected of me. As I sat there planning my day, which would include visits to several antique dealers and a tour of the National Museum of Scotland, I realized I hadn't thought about my family's reaction to my departure in over a week. That realization itself was liberating. I had spent so many years trying to earn love that was never going to be freely given. Now I was learning what it felt like to live without that constant weight of disapproval and expectation. Looking back on that moment at Mariah's wedding, I understood that my mother's slap had been the final gift she could give me. The gift of absolute clarity about who she really was and what our relationship would always be. And as I finished my coffee and prepared to explore another medieval street in my new city, I knew that Grandma Helen would have been proud of the choice I had made. I was finally free to become the person she had always believed I could be, and I intended to honor her memory by living fully and fearlessly in the life I was building for myself. The revenge I had chosen wasn't dramatic or public. It was simply the complete removal of my presence and resources from people who had never valued either. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away and never look back, carrying with you only the lessons learned and the strength gained from surviving those who never truly saw your worth.